Catherine sits alone at her kitchen table, staring at her phone. Her sister's number is on the screen, but she just can't bring herself to press call. It's been 2 years since they last spoke, 2 years since that explosive argument that left both of them hurt and angry. The holidays are approaching, and the weight of their broken relationship feels heavier than ever before. Maybe you can relate to Catherine's story, but perhaps it's not a sister. Maybe it's a brother or a parent or another family member. That person who was once so close but now feels just worlds apart. The one whose name brings a mix of anger and hurt and even bitterness whenever their name comes up. You know, family relationships can cut deeper than any other kind of hurt, can't they? The people who know us best often have the power to wound us the most. But what if there's more to life than carrying the burden of broken relationships? What if the very pain that divides us could become the bridge that brings us back together? If you were to survey any group of adults today, almost everyone would have a story about family tension and strain. You could walk down the streets of Vancouver, Toronto, or Montreal, and you'll find at least someone wrestling with a complicated family relationship. Some are dealing with decades-old hurts, while others are facing fresh wounds from a recent conflict. When we're young, we often think that family relationships just happen naturally. But as we grow older, we discover they actually require intentional work, don't they? They require understanding and sometimes even difficult conversations. Mental health professionals consistently observe that family conflict profoundly impacts their clients' well-being, affecting everything from their daily stress levels to even their ability to form healthy relationships with others. What makes family conflict particularly challenging is its unique ability to trigger our deepest insecurities and oldest wounds. Maybe it's the brother who always seems to get your parents' approval while you feel overlooked. Or perhaps it's your sister who took a different path in life, leading to judgment and misunderstanding. Or maybe it's the parent whose expectations feel like they're just an impossible standard to meet. In the Bible, in the book of Genesis, right at the beginning, we find a story that mirrors these complex family dynamics in surprising ways. It's the story of a man named Joseph and his brothers. It's a tale of jealousy, betrayal, and eventually healing. Joseph was his father's favorite son, which created some deep resentment among his brothers. Sound familiar? Favoritism, jealousy, misunderstanding, these same issues that tore apart a family thousands of years ago still challenge us today. But here's what's fascinating. Joseph's story doesn't end with betrayal. It's not just about the pain of being sold into slavery by his own brothers or the years of separation that followed, but it's ultimately a story about the possibility of healing, even in the most broken family relationships. It's about how time, perspective, and yes, even faith can transform our deepest wounds into opportunities for growth and even reconciliation. What if the very relationship that causes you the most pain right now could become a story of hope? What if the strain you're experiencing isn't the end of your story, but rather a chapter in a large narrative of healing and restoration. Have you ever wondered why family conflicts cut so much deeper than any other relationship struggles? I think it's because our family knows us at our core. I mean, they've been there through our highs and lows. They know our history, our weaknesses, and our triggers. This is what makes Joseph's story so relevant for us today. It begins with a young man named Joseph. He was the 11th of 12 sons, but his father's clear favorite. His father Jacob showed his favoritism quite openly, even giving Joseph a stunning, beautiful gift, a coat of many colors. As you might imagine, this didn't sit well with his brothers. And to make matters worse, Joseph had dreams suggesting that one day his family would bow down to him. And he wasn't shy about sharing those dreams. In Genesis chapter 37, verses 5 to 8, we read, "One night Joseph had a dream, and when he told his brothers about it, they hated him more than ever. 'Listen to this dream,' he said. 'We were out in the field tying up bundles of grain. Suddenly my bundles stood up, and your bundles all gathered around and bowed low before mine.' His brothers responded, 'So you think you will be our king, do you? Do you actually think you will reign over us?' And they hated him all the more because of his dreams and the way he talked about them." The situation reached a breaking point when Joseph's brothers saw him approaching them in the fields one day. Their resentment had grown so deep that they plotted to actually kill him. One of his brothers, Reuben, intervened and suggested throwing Joseph into maybe an empty cistern instead, secretly planning to rescue him later. But before Reuben could carry out his plan, the other brothers saw a caravan of traders passing by. And so they reached down and they pulled out Joseph from the pit and sold him as a slave for just 20 pieces of silver. They then took his special coat, dipped it in animal blood, and convinced their father that Joseph had been killed by wild animals. Imagine the trauma for this moment. Betrayed by your own flesh and blood, by your own brothers, sold like property, stripped of your identity, and then transported to a foreign land. This wasn't a story of just simple sibling rivalry. This was deep. This was life-altering betrayal. Many of us know what family betrayal feels like, though perhaps not to this extreme. Maybe it was a parent who abandoned you, a sibling who turned others against you, or maybe family members who rejected you because of your life choices. Joseph's story in Egypt is a remarkable journey of resilience. He was sold as a slave. He was falsely accused of a crime he didn't commit and then thrown into a prison. Yet through it all, he maintained his integrity, he maintained his faith, and eventually, through God's intervention and Joseph's gift for interpreting dreams, he rose to become second in command over all of Egypt. He went from pit to palace, from prisoner to prime minister. Years later, a severe famine struck the region, forcing Joseph's brothers to travel to Egypt seeking for food. They didn't recognize the powerful Egyptian official that was standing before them was actually their long-lost brother. But Joseph recognized them right away. This is where the story becomes extraordinary, showing us 3 principles for healing family relationships. The first principle is creating safe spaces for honest conversations. When Joseph finally decides to reveal his identity, Genesis chapter 45 verse 22 tells us, Joseph could stand it no longer. There were many people in the room, and he said to his attendants, "Out, all of you." So he was alone with his brothers when he told them who he was. Then he broke down and wept. He wept so loudly the Egyptians could hear him. You see, Joseph understood that vulnerability requires safety. Dr. Brené Brown, renowned for her research on vulnerability, reminds us that vulnerability is not winning or losing. It's having the courage to show up and be seen when we have no control over the outcome. The principle is crucial for us today. When we're addressing family wounds, we need to be thoughtful about the setting. A family gathering for holiday dinner might not be the best time for difficult conversations. Instead, consider choosing a neutral, private location, setting aside uninterrupted time and having an initial conversation, maybe one-on-one, rather than in a group for the first time. Also, create clear boundaries for the conversation, ensuring both parties feel safe to express their feelings. The second principle is acknowledging pain while seeing a bigger picture. In Genesis chapter 50, verse 20, Joseph makes this profound statement to his brothers. He says, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good. He brought me to this position so I could save the lives of many people." Notice that Joseph doesn't minimize what his brothers did. He doesn't say, "Oh, it's okay, it wasn't that bad." No, he acknowledges that they intended to harm him. But he also sees how God worked through his suffering to accomplish something greater. We don't have to deny or minimize past hurt to move forward. Healing doesn't mean pretending the pain never happened. We can acknowledge harm while still choosing to move forward, but it does take time. The reunion with his brothers didn't happen immediately after he gained power in Egypt. There were years of processing, years of personal growth, years of God working on his heart. This is the big picture that we don't see at times. The third principle for healing family relationships from Joseph's story is taking the initiative in reconciliation, even when you're the one who is wronged. When Joseph reveals himself to his brothers, they were terrified. They probably expected revenge. Instead, look at Joseph's response. "Please come closer," he said to them. So they came closer. And he said again, "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into slavery in Egypt. But don't be upset and don't be angry with yourselves for selling me to this place." Joseph doesn't wait for his brothers to get everything right. He doesn't demand an apology first. Instead, he invites them closer. When they actually want to run away, he takes the initiative to bridge the gap. He offers reassurance instead of revenge and provides for their needs despite their past actions. Joseph's forgiveness ultimately freed him, not just his brothers. When he finally revealed his identity, he was able to weep openly. Years of pent-up emotion finally released. Back in Genesis chapter 45, verse 2, it says that he wept so loudly the Egyptians heard him, and word of it quickly carried to Pharaoh's palace. I can imagine that this wasn't just crying. This was a deep and a profound weeping. This is a deep release of emotions. Joseph's story actually points us to an even greater story of reconciliation. Because just as Joseph took that first step toward his brothers, despite being the one who was wronged, Jesus took the ultimate first step toward us. He left heaven to come to earth, to bridge the gap that we couldn't bridge ourselves. And like Joseph's brothers, we didn't deserve this reconciliation. We were the ones who turned away. We caused the separation. And yet Jesus, like Joseph, initiated the restoration. He didn't wait for us to get everything right first. He came to us, creating a way for our relationship with God to be restored. Many of us carry the weight of unforgiveness like heavy chains, and we think that we're punishing the person who hurt us. But in reality, we're often the ones being held captive by it, our own bitterness. Jesus, you see, he understood this connection between forgiveness and freedom. He says in Matthew chapter 18, verses 21 and 22, "Then Peter came to him and asked, 'Lord, how often should I forgive someone who sins against me? Is it 7 times? "No, not 7 times, Jesus replied, "but 70 times 7. The number wasn't about keeping count. It was about adopting a lifestyle of forgiveness. Now, let's be clear. Forgiveness doesn't mean what happened was okay. It doesn't mean you have to return to an unsafe situation or pretend that the hurt never happened. Joseph didn't immediately trust his brothers when they arrived in Egypt. He actually tested them. He was watching their behavior and looked for signs of genuine change. But he did choose to release the right to revenge. And in doing so, he found his own freedom. Think about it. All those years Joseph spent in Egypt, he could have been consumed by bitterness. He could have spent every day plotting his revenge. But instead, he remained open to God working in his life. When he finally had the chance, the opportunity came for revenge, he discovered that his heart was free from the need to hurt those who hurt him. As theologian, ethicist, and author Lewis B. Smedes writes, "To forgive is to set a prisoner free and discover that the prisoner was you." This kind of forgiveness isn't easy. It often feels impossible. Sometimes we have to forgive the same hurt multiple times as waves of pain come back. But here's what we learn from Joseph's story. His ability to forgive didn't just change his life, it saved his entire family. Genesis chapter 50, verses 19 to 21 shows us his heart. It says, "But Joseph replied, 'Don't be afraid of me. Am I God that I can punish you? You intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good. He brought me to this position so I could save the lives of many people. No, don't be afraid. I will continue to take care of you and your children.' So he reassured them by speaking kindly to them." The blessing Joseph found in forgiveness wasn't just spiritual, it was very practical. He was able to be present with his family again. He could enjoy relationships with his brother's children. He could honor his father in his final years. He could live free from the corrosive effects of bitterness. And most importantly, he could see how God had used even his deepest wounds to bring about something good. Now you might be thinking, yeah, but my situation is different. The hurt is too deep. Or maybe you're wondering if reconciliation is even possible in your situation. These are valid feelings. Not every family story will mirror Joseph's exactly, and not every relationship can or should be fully restored. Sometimes, like Joseph's years in Egypt, we need time and distance. Sometimes we need to maintain boundaries even after reconciliation begins. But here's what I want you to take away from Joseph's story. Your family story isn't finished yet. Healing family relationships isn't about forgetting the past. It's about choosing to write a different future. It's about recognizing that while we can't control others' actions, we can control our response. We can choose, like Joseph did, to be agents of healing rather than harboring hurt. And sometimes even our deepest wounds can become a source for our greatest purpose. And so what would it look like for you to begin this journey? What if, like Joseph, you could find purpose even in your pain?
Hi, today I'm on the set of More to Life, where Rob Zama presents his heartwarming shows. Have you ever asked these questions? Why am I here? Is there a God? Why is there so much evil and suffering? And why are there so many different religions, and which one is true? Is the Bible fact or fiction? Who is Jesus of Nazareth? Was he truly God, as Christians say he is? And why did Jesus come to earth to die? And how does his death offer us salvation? What happens when I die? Is there really a heaven or hell? These questions and others we answer on our online Bible study platform at hopestudy.ca. There, you will find answers to these and other life-changing questions. If you have any questions, please email us at hopestudy@hopetv.ca. God bless you. See you there.
Looking at Joseph's story, here are 3 reflective questions to help you process your own journey toward family healing. Number 1, what unresolved family pain am I carrying right now? This is a challenging question that requires honest self-reflection. Like Joseph in a pit, you might be dealing with deep betrayal, or like his brothers, carrying the weight of past actions. Take a moment to identify what emotions surface when you think about a certain relationship in your family. How long have you been carrying that pain? In what ways has this unresolved conflict affected other areas of your life? Are there specific triggers or situations that bring these feelings to the surface? Sometimes we've carried pain for so long that it feels normal. But Joseph's story shows us that acknowledgement is the first step towards healing. Listen, you don't have to have it all together. You don't have to have all the answers, but just naming the pain is crucial for beginning the healing process. Number 2, what would it look like to create a safe space for healing in that relationship? Remember how Joseph cleared the room before revealing his identity to his brothers? Safety is essential for vulnerable conversations. Consider what boundaries need to be in place for you to feel emotionally safe. What environment would make difficult conversations even possible? Who might need to be present or absent from these conversations? What ground rules would help both parties feel respected? What small step could you take this week to begin creating that safe space? Now, you might not be ready for a full reconciliation conversation yet, and you know what? That's okay. Like Joseph, who waited for the right moment, timing is very important. And so focus on what you can control. You can control your preparation, your boundaries, and your readiness to engage when the time comes. And finally, number 3, how might God be working through this family challenge for a greater purpose? Now, this question isn't about minimizing your pain or suggesting that your hurt was somehow good. Rather, it's about finding meaning in your journey, just as Joseph did. Reflect on, what have you learned about yourself through this challenge? How has this experience shaped your character? What insights or empathy have you gained that might help others? What strengths have you developed because of this situation? How might your story bring hope to someone else facing a similar challenge? Joseph's powerful words, "You intended to harm me, but God turned it into something good," reminds us that our pain isn't just meaningless. Sometimes our deepest hurts can become the source of our greatest ministry to others. And so as you consider these questions this week, I encourage you to write down your responses. Writing them down helps process emotions and track your healing journey. Process what you're comfortable with a trusted friend, because sometimes we just need someone else who we can talk to, who can see our blind spots. Take one step at a time. Healing is usually a process, not just an event. Be patient with yourself. Like Joseph's story, transformation takes time. Just stay open to unexpected ways God might work. These questions aren't meant to burden you, but to guide you toward healing. You might want to focus on just one question this week, or you might find that one question leads naturally to the others. The key is to engage with them honestly and at your own pace. If these questions bring up deep emotions or memories, that's normal. Consider reaching out to a counselor or pastor who can help you process these feelings in a healthy way. Just as Joseph's story includes others who helped him along the way, you don't have to walk this journey alone. Most importantly, be gentle with yourself in this process. Healing family relationships is complex work, and every story is unique. What steps toward healing feel possible for you today? Think about that. I'd love to stay connected with you and support you on your journey. To do that, follow More to Life on social media, where you can message me directly with any questions or comments from today's presentation. And so whether you're searching for answers, needing encouragement, or simply looking for community, I'm here to support you.
Hello friends, it's great to be here with you on More to Life today. I'm positive you've been blessed by this program, and I hope that you share it with your loved ones. Thank you for your support so far. We need it so this ministry can grow and reach a broader audience. If you haven't already partnered with us as an agent of hope, I want to share with you how you can do so. Above all, we need your prayers. Pray that these programs will speak to the hearts of people all across Canada. Also, any time that you have to spare in order to volunteer with one of our projects will be greatly appreciated. Lastly, your financial support would be greatly appreciated. You can make a one-time or a recurring donation. Thank you once again for joining us on this exciting journey of sharing hope across Canada and beyond.
Today we've explored how Joseph's ancient story offers us timeless wisdom for healing our own family relationships. We learned that creating safe spaces for honest conversations can transform conflict into connection. We also discovered that acknowledging pain while seeing a bigger picture can help us move forward. And finally, we saw how taking initiative in reconciliation, even when we're the ones who are hurt, can break cycles and cycles of pain. Most importantly, we learned that forgiveness often frees us more than the person we're forgiving. Your family story might feel broken right now. Maybe you're the one who was hurt, like Joseph, or maybe you're like his brothers, carrying the weight of that hurt. Perhaps you're like the woman I spoke to, realizing that your unresolved pain is affecting more than just one relationship. Either way, there's hope for a new chapter. Remember, healing doesn't always mean everything goes back to the way it was. Sometimes it means finding a new way forward. Sometimes it means maintaining boundaries while keeping your heart open. But always, it means choosing to write a different ending to your story. What if today marks the beginning of your healing journey? What if years from now you look back on this moment as when everything began to change? Like Joseph, you might find that what others intended for harm, God can use for good. You might discover that taking that first step, though frightening, leads to freedom you never thought possible. There's more to life than carrying the weight of broken relationships. There's more to your story than the chapter you're in right now. And with God's help, healing is possible. One step, one conversation, one choice at a time.